So I was looking around the other day, and I found this old script here for a video I was going to make a really long time ago. It was actually going to be like the third JZNES video, but I thought it might be a little weird for that format. I was going to add more to it and stuff, and then I just never kind of got around to it, but it was a comparison of two games at the time that I was playing, and that was Final Fantasy 13, which I really hate and is like my least favorite game of all time, as I'll get into here soon. But my friend at the time really loved it, and it was like his favorite game. And I'll be mentioning that in the thing there. But Final Fantasy 13, which hold on. If you can see, I cracked it there. Probably like, pounded it at one point because I fucking hate that game. And then, see, at the time, I'm going to mention it in there too, but at the time I had this bet going with my friend that, not a bet, but like a sort of trade-off situation where he would play Dragon Quest VIII, which is one of my favorite RPGs, and then I hadn't played Persona yet, so at the time it was my favorite RPG, and then I would play Final Fantasy 13, which ended up really being a shit deal for me because Final Fantasy 13 is one of the most boring and linear games I've ever played. But at the time, I was also playing a different game. Huh, that's weird. It has the zip code on the back there. That's strange. Anyway, I won't show the back. Swords and Serpents on the NES, which is I was really getting into the NES at that point. I didn't have my full collection like I do now, but this game was kind of free and it was open and it was like this really cool sort of game for an NES game, and I'm like, wow, this is really unique compared to shitty Final Fantasy 13 here. So these games, I thought I had this brilliant like kind of like script written up about both of them that was going to compare the games and kind of see where one was better than the other and that kind of thing, just to kind of show Mayab that even an NES game from back in the day could be much better than this game that was all substance all style and no substance. This would be more of both, this would be a better mix of both things there. So I'll get into it. I thought it'd be interesting to finally get the script out there. I wasn't going to do like a big thing on it, so I just thought, hey, I'll record this. It's pretty much just going to be me reading the thing so yeah. I recall once having a conversation on the subject of Final Fantasy 13 wherein he, if I refer to he, that's Mayab in this article, inspired an unintentional metaphor about the taste in games directly afterwards. Sometimes I'll stumble too because the words aren't always written properly. I wrote this I just did it right there. I wrote this rambling after like a really hard night of work when I used to work at, back in the day, really hard. I used to work a lot, and so I wrote this in a stupor, basically, but I thought it turned out pretty well after reading it more recently. So I just found this kind of more recently, so I thought, hey, I'll get this idea out there finally. Sorry, back to the thing. I've been speaking on how I would rather play Swords and Serpents because my taste is in simplistic games with a lot of depth to them in their design to keep the player motivated to continue playing and pressing on. I had argued the design to be very similar, as mostly the first 20 or so hours is a straightforward linear affair consisted of what felt like constant dungeons. This is Final Fantasy 13, I think, by the way. Constant dungeons, that is to say, an area with large-scale action as well as showpiece design, essentially a level, quote unquotes. I have it in quotes there because they're not really levels in Final Fantasy 13. They're just kind of long hallways. I know that's a joke, but it's actually true. So back when in any other game back when that's 95% of what they were back in the day. What I'm saying is 95% of games were just levels. That's what they were. That they were about the action. So in the NES era, games generally didn't waste any time with the show don't tell mentality that is lost in countless menus and menus explaining very sophisticated upgrade systems and crafting mechanics that work in a vastly different style than most through text and vague pictures. The amount of detail necessary used Necessary use to reward by learning in-game by playing rather than through long drawing paragraphs using unspecific language to convey how much systems work. In Final Fantasy 13, they just kind of try to explain things through text. It's not a very good way of going about it. My point here is that game design should teach you how to it should convey how to play the game. You know, that's kind of an important thing. In the NES era, that's all they had to kind of teach you how to play the game. You know, in Final Fantasy 13, they're like, do all this stuff, and we're trying to teach you about these systems and all this stuff, and it's ridiculous. You know, but the simplicity of Swords and Serpents is a lot better in that sense. In Swords and Serpents and many turn-based RPGs in the PS2 era, battles and quirky mechanics are explained through gameplay and not lengthy, boring tutorials. My main point for the older RPGs versus new was the amount of freedom given to the player to choose where it is they were going to go and what it was they were going to accomplish, leaving most of the poor pacing issues of a linear, non-stop action and spectacle RPG to be non-existent. While SAS, Swords and Serpents, is a very linear game in terms of where you need to go, the objective simply being to proceed through 16 floors of a dungeon, the exploration elements of finding gear off the beaten path or finding secret warps for faster travel is rewarding to the player and makes the experience satisfying. So what I'm saying basically is that the world design in the Swords and Serpents game, where it actually has world design, it's not just a long hallway, basically is a much better system than Final Fantasy 13's lack of such a thing. So, in Final Fantasy 13, you go forward with very few branching paths and are minimally rewarded for a gated amount of progression and a fierce restriction to your experience. While you can customize and upgrade your gear, it's all on a path until halfway through the game. In this regard, the freedom I experience in SAS to be able to press forward with the only restriction being my confidence or whether or not my skill level can get me through the next floor leaves the challenge in my hands. If I do decide I'm too weak, I have the option to grind in SAS, whereas in Final Fantasy 13, all the enemies will respawn as the same monster, killing any level of variety. So there's a lot more enemies and variety in Swords and Serpents, and something I don't mention here when I talk about the combat, because I didn't actually know this when I had written the script, but in the combat, in Final Fantasy 13, there's like one or two enemies, maybe a few more, I don't even remember at this point, but that you have to like attack at different areas. They have like multiple points in the same enemy. In Swords and Serpents, you can attack any of the different directional ways and it'll get you different results, and I didn't even know this when I played the game, so I made the game intentionally a lot harder on myself. This is something I didn't figure out through the game design, but had I figured that out, that would have been pretty cool, but I'm just saying there's more variety in the combat as well, which I'll get to here in a minute, but it's just an interesting little detail there. In terms of tensions, Swords has a brilliant system of no healing items, rather a temple on the first floor and every variation of 5 afterwards. So, like 5, 10, etc., etc. That fully restore HP and MP, whereas 13 boasts a non-threatening retry system that allows you to simply retry a battle with no consequence and infinite times. So that's bullshit, right? Obviously, it just makes the game way too easy when you can just retry infinite times. Whereas Swords and Serpents has a sort of checkpoint system, which is punishing, but also, good, I think, in terms of design. I prefer that kind of system. In Swords and Serpents, dying has a huge impact, as you'll have to restart from the last save on the last temple floor, though you can save anywhere, and your EXP towards the next level, which is conveniently collective as a party, unlike 13's non-existent overall levels, as they're all job-specific levels. So their leveling system is lost. So their leveling system is really convoluted in Final Fantasy 13. It's more you level up, but you I think I don't remember honestly, but I think you level up, and then there's like this huge skill tree of like things that you have to put points into, and it just requires an insane and stupid amount of grinding if you want any sort of good moves, in my opinion. So, which sucks. You do that in Swords and Serpents as well, but that's only if you want to do that. You can make it all the way to the bottom floor if you're good enough and know where things are. And I mean, you don't even have to pick up anything. Maybe you just know how the battle system works or something. You can go to the end of the game without even grinding at all. That's the sort of freedom I like. That's really good. This adds a sense of tension to playing SAS and creates a vast, yeah, I think it was vast. It says vast, but I think I meant vastly more, or no, okay, a vast more amount of interest in not dying. In 13, it becomes grating to continually lose to an enemy that takes forever to take down, only to have to go back and try harder the next time around. So basically, when you die to an enemy in 13, it's just a fucking slog to go back through and just keep fighting that same enemy. Even if they let you retry, why would you want to retry unless you have to beat the game like I did? You don't want to retry. You just want to move on with the game, and it's like it's impossible. You just can't because it sucks, and you just spend forever on each enemy. It just sucks. This is mostly due to the similar and somewhat dull combat styles wherein the player hits a single button with very little variety other than healing and paying enough attention to not die. You can use spells in both, but generally physical attacks work just as well, and in 13 the spells are set up for you if you shift to them, so the player is more likely not to try if they don't have to and just mash the button instead. Basically, there's this stupid system in Final Fantasy 13 where it's I don't even fucking remember what they're called, but you switch between these like classes, and there's combinations of classes for your characters that you do, and they basically just do everything for you because they wanted the game to be faster. So if you want a healer class and you want somebody to attack, and then you want somebody to be like a mage, you set up those classes as a preset thing beforehand, and you just switch between them in battle. So you're not doing anything. You're just watching them play the game for you. But all you're doing is switching between classes. You can sit there and go through the menus and do all the spells and stuff, but you're going to die like that because they wanted the game to be faster, which, in my opinion, is really... It's okay. I'll give it to them. It's an interesting thing, but it's really bad and dumb when you actually play it. So it didn't work out. Good concept, bad execution, I would say. I don't even know if you could do that concept well, but whatever. So with the simplistic way of battling, both games engage very minimally in that regard. Outside of this, there's not much to 13, though, besides its admittedly nice-looking visuals and a scarce amount of searching for treasure on a linear path, whereas the free-roaming nature of SAS and its switch puzzles and hidden secret treasures, both of which incentivize... I don't think I spelled that word right at all. Incentivize exploration and force variety and allow the player their own adventures if they so choose to embark on them, which makes it a more well-balanced and engaging experience altogether. So basically my point is there's no really looking around in Final Fantasy 13 for items and stuff, which is good, but also it takes away a lot of the fun of the exploration of Swords and Serpents and other RPGs of that sort, so... which is good. I mean, I like to explore and stuff. While in their time, both games really pushed the limits of their systems visually. I don't know, I keep going about the visuals of Final Fantasy 13 here. Look, I've changed my opinion on this. Final Fantasy 13 has shit visuals. I don't care. They looked alright for back in the day. They were good for when they came out, but man, they just are so boring now. They look so boring and just so bad now. They look so dull, whereas Swords and Serpents actually, for its time, is a very visually impressive game. Push the limits of the systems visually. Swords and Serpents with its impressive 3D maze world and its plethora of animations for each character, and 13 with its overall grand visual design flair. Games survive on their gameplay. I guess, games will survive on their gameplay, as that's what will ultimately determine whether or not a player is invested enough to finish the game. So basically my point here is visuals don't sell a game. I mean, they'll sell a game, but you have to have good gameplay to get through the game. So yeah, which Final Fantasy 13 does not. Okay. Many other factors like story do play a part, but generally a player needs to play well in order to beat the game. In the end, I find myself very invested in the freedom of Swords and Serpents as well as its simplicity, and opposed to the complicated upgrade system and linear non-explorative levels of Final Fantasy 13. Playing SAS is a treat of which I can't put down into the wee hours of the morning, whereas Final Fantasy 13 I can only take in small chunks and feel drained after a few hours. This obviously is very subjective, however, as my friend loved 13, and hails it as one of the best and his favorite in the series of the Final Fantasy series. At the time, that was his favorite. I still don't know what his favorite is. Maybe 7? I don't know. I know he hasn't played some of the other big ones, like 6 or whatever, but granted, his outlook is a lot different than mine, as he's only played SAS in a 2 to 4 player mode, which is the same game, but your engagement is incredibly divided, given everyone then controls 1 to 2 characters in battle, and still player 1 moves through the dungeons, making it a badly designed mode in the sense that there's a lot of gaps of interest while traveling and controlling a non-healer character. So basically, Swords and Serpents has this 4-player mode, which is a neat idea, but playing an RPG with 4 players where each of you controls one of the players just doesn't really work out in the end, especially with an NES RPG, because you're still only moving with player 1, and in the battles it's kind of boring if you're a healer. All you have to do is click heal to the right person at the right time, and sometimes people don't really understand like what you're doing, so people just mash buttons. So it makes it much more like Final Fantasy 13, and it makes it much more boring doing that mode. But it was a good idea, just badly executed again. After I explain this perspective of tasting games to him, he chooses to ignore it and talk about tea and how he enjoys drinking it to start his morning. While I find tea disgusting and too strong without a ton of flavoring for my liking, it did prompt this in my head as a moment of a eureka. So basically I figured out this metaphor from him talking about tea randomly after we were talking about that. Tea is like Final Fantasy 13. It's simple with complex flavor, takes a while and effort to make and get into, and is best warmed and in its elements to the person who doesn't mind putting some time in to get the goods, whereas Swords and Serpents is a nice cool Mountain Dew in the morning that every sip pumps you with a rush and takes no time to get into / make, goes down smoothly, and can be drank at any pace, whereas with hot tea, you have to take your time to slowly get through it, not to burn your throat. And then I'm talking about Mountain Dew here again. This is a really long sentence. I used to like to do this. And it's chill in its leisurely bottle form to be taken anywhere at the drinker's pace. In the end, it comes down to taste. I prefer a free, open RPG with exploration and a simple style for customizations and battles that keep me engaged, while others, like my friend, prefer a linear adventure with consistent action and little exploration, but a complex upgrade system. Because of this, when I finish Final Fantasy 13, I'm obligated to, because it's playing Dragon Quest 8, because that's one of my favorite. Yet to complete it. I mentioned that earlier. I don't think I'll be as sad as I will be to have finished SAS in terms of no longer being able to play them. I'll see my experience with Final Fantasy 13 as a slog, whereas I'll remember SAS somewhat fondly for its freedom to the player. Also, yes, I know Final Fantasy 13 opens up a bit and introduces party customization and an overworld, but it only made it more fun in a few regards through minor and rather meaningless exploration, side quests, etc. Now, okay, let's talk about that for a second. The open world thing in Final Fantasy 13 is not an open world. There's one area like partway through the game, like almost near the end, where you can run around and do a few side quests and stuff, and you never go back there again. You can go back there like kind of near the end of the game, but like you never go back there again. This is supposed to be like the hub world, and it's not. And it could have been a good idea had they put like little areas around the hub world to kind of like get you going and stuff, and then you could like choose. That would have been a good idea, but they didn't do that. So it's bad, and I don't agree with myself or anybody else to saying, oh, it gets good 20 hours in, you know, when you get to the hub world, because the hub world isn't very good anyway. So no, that's not a valid excuse for this game. It's still a linear game for the most part afterwards too, and it still doesn't deserve. It doesn't have a lot going on in it. That overworld that makes. It doesn't have a lot going on in the overworld that makes me care. My personality values gameplay above all else, and therefore it's a letdown for me in its exploration. All subjective. Go ahead and think it's a masterpiece. I won't stop you. More power to you if you love it. Yeah, so I was going to make more to that and everything, and I was going to make this whole big video about it, but I just kind of figured, I discovered that again the other day. Hold on a second. I discovered this script again the other day, and I thought, oh yeah, this is really interesting, and it's, I thought it was really well written for the time, especially knowing how exhausted I must have been when I was writing it. That's why there was a few like spelling errors and stuff in there, but yeah, I thought that was a pretty good comparison of those two games. So in the end, you know, this game from the early 90s that, like, you know, at the end of the life cycle was intensely better than this, like, you know, gajillions of dollar, you know, Square RPG from the late, you know, like 2015, 13. When did the fuck did this come? 2010? I don't remember where the hell. I think it was 2010 or 9 or something. Who cares about this shit? Get that out of here. This game, Acclaim. I don't remember who actually made it. There's somebody who actually made it, but it's pretty good. Is it a masterpiece? No, but if you like NES games, you like NES RPGs, it's pretty old school. I would definitely recommend playing Swords and Serpents. I was gonna do a whole JZNES on this at some point, but you know, it just didn't really work out. You know, it's a lot of effort to edit together that kind of stuff. You know, I'll put effort into my videos, sure, but I don't really feel like it at the moment. You know, it's kind of like I just want to get in front of a camera and talk about something, because I think that's kind of the style I work best at. You know, my highly edited stuff always ends up, the little flaws in the editing end up being the big talking point of that anyway. You know, so it's like, why do I even bother with that? Like, this is my format right here, you know, talking at the camera, because that's what I love to do. Swords and Serpents, it's a fucking great game. If you don't have it in your NES collection, you like NES games, it's pretty cheap. I don't think it costs you more than $20. I recommend this. Go out and buy this. This you throw in the trash, all right? Get that out of here. Break the case. If you see this, smash it with a hammer right away. I don't remember what nerd episode that's from, but you do it. You just smash it with a hammer. This, you send this to the planes. You put this in your collection. This is good, all right? This is really good. Use a guide if you have to. I think I probably did. Or a YouTube video. Oh, I used a YouTube video. That's what it was. You know, and no shame. Fucking, it made the game better. It's a great game. You should play it. Play Swords and Serpents. Next time we'll talk about Beyond the Beyond. Later. This is JZNES saying, keep it classic and stick around for more games and underrated games and videos. I don't remember what this is. Keep it classic, stick around for more underrated games and videos, and I'll see you next time. JZ